Transition for Union Reconfiguration. We love Nigeria. And there you are. That is the premise on which this interview will take place. And I'm pleased to bring into studio again Tony Nnadi. Let's see if I can get him into the studio without any hitches this time. And I can also bring in the great and the awesome Nnadi Uechi. Where is she? If I can get her in now. Ah, your signal, Nnadi. Let's see if we've got you in. Nnadi, can you hear us? Ah, okay. And Tony Nnadi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Ah, good.
Let me come on the camera.
I recognize you got the camera off because of the signal strength, but just put it on for a moment, just so that people know you are actually there. This is not some AI speaking to us. On for a moment there, Tony.
Right.
For a moment, so they know you're actually there. There you are.
It's because of our network that I had to stay off so I could be sure we're in. So I'm here. Welcome, everybody, once more. Thank you for having me.
Right. Brilliant. Go on. Turn off your camera. I want to make sure we maintain a steady signal with you this time. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. I believe we've lost Nnadi. I'm sure she will return momentarily. First of all, Tony, how are you, first of all? How are you? How are you keeping?
Right, I'm good. God be praised. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And I have been monitoring your many YouTube transmissions, and it has been extremely informative. And I've been monitoring both the national and international tracking of the work of NINAS and the impact you are having on Nigerian society. Okay. And since we last spoken, of course, we've had the Supreme Court give a decision in respect of the presidential elections. Okay.
Right.
I have to say, like you, I was somewhat surprised. Say the least. I was somewhat surprised. You may have a point to make. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. The matter is still where it is. The election that was done in February of 2023 has remained inconclusive in the sense that, yes, the courts, both the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, have made their pronouncements. But there is something that sits above the court called the Constitution.
Yes.
The Constitution of Nigeria requires 25% of the valid votes cast in the Federal Capital Territory to return a candidate as president in an election. And the candidate that INEC chose to announce as winner did not meet that requirement. And so NINAS did put up its position about what has happened with the election. We declare the outcome inconclusive on account of the fact that what the Constitution required to be done in the circumstance had not been done. And the Supreme Court cannot place itself above the Constitution. So as far as NINAS is concerned, yes, there's a government in place, but NINAS insists that that government is illicit. NINAS will stand on account of the limited toleration of that Constitution for the sake of peace.
Right.
We are rejecting that Constitution as a fraud. But because we do not want anarchy, we also put it out there that we will tolerate it until we get to the table of discussion. Except the system is inviting self-help, something that will now become Somalia if it's not well handled. But NINAS is not for that. NINAS is more concerned about the peoples of Nigeria who are trapped in this madness we see. And so what we have now is an interregnum. Nigeria is a disputed project currently governed by an interregnum, an illicit government. And the best that can be taken from that election of 2023, February 25 precisely, the best that can come from it is that it gets transformed. The outcome, the disputed outcome, gets transformed into a transitioning, the type that South Africa did in 1990 to get itself out of the apartheid bind. That's the kind of problem we have to solve now. And so NINAS is very clear in saying that the election was inconclusive.
Yes.
The outcome is illegitimate to the extent that the Supreme Court jettisoned the Constitution of Nigeria, as disputed as it is, as faulty as it is. We say, in place of anarchy, let us hold on to it until we all get to the discussion table. That's where we still are. And you can see what has happened to Nigeria since after that election.
Yes.
Nigeria is on a free fall.
It is
People
indeed.
are being killed all over the place, much more than it was, not much more than was the case before the election.
Yes.
And NINAS did warn everybody, say, let us leave this journey to election alone under this constitution. Because as long as that constitution is in place, all of the things can only get worse.
Yes. Yes.
The naira as at today
Yes.
is exchanging to the dollar in excess of 1,500
Correct.
on the street. You can't even find it.
Indeed.
And the cost of living has gone completely beyond where most of the citizens can aspire to get to. And, you know, the corruption that we were lamenting all this year is now working proudly all around. Impunity all over the place. Blood all over the place.
If I may, Tony, and thank you. That's a very useful introduction. But of course, I speak to Nigerians every day. Yeah. And what I'm struck by is the feeling of dread. Yeah. It's feelings of dread, feelings that they feel, far too many of them, that they cannot do anything about the current situation. Okay. And therefore, it is incumbent upon people with my profile to empower, to encourage them to think carefully about the future. Okay. And the only future that I can see is, of course, the future and the proposition that's been put forward by NINAS. I went through those propositions as a prelude to starting this interview. I'm not sure if you saw the propositions that I announced on screen. I'm not sure if you saw that. But these are your own propositions that you set out. Okay. And I would like you to add substance to the propositions that NINAS has declared. Okay. And I just want you to take the audience through the propositions as to how we can transition for change. And maybe if I were to put it back on screen, you will guide us through what you intend, because you're the national convener. You're the person best able to answer some really important questions. Sorry, let me just take it off for a second. Let me take this off. Okay, if I just take it back for a moment. And you just take us through these propositions, okay? So the 5-point proposition is now the only viable mechanism for halting the state capture of Nigeria and for safely navigating Nigeria to the harbour of constitutional reconstruction. I believe they're your words, Tony. They're your words, yes?
Yes, NINAS, I'm merely the spokesman of NINAS. Every single thing you see here, everything you hear me say in broadcast.
Yes.
They are not the positions of Tony Nnadi per se.
Okay.
They are the positions of NINAS for which I speak. And this 5-point proposition is, is what NINAS had placed on the table since the 16th day of December in 2020, ahead of that election, to say, look, we've been wobbling around this matter for 23 years, since 1999. And Nigeria has been sliding progressively, steadily, and rapidly into damnation.
Yes.
On every front you can imagine. Nigerians are fleeing, particularly young Nigerians, to every part of the world.
Yes.
Some are prepared to die in the desert.
Indeed.
Some are sinking into the Mediterranean.
Yes.
And even when they get overseas, you see them in the UK, you see them in the US, you see them all over Asia. What are they running away from? And so we said to the politicians across the party line, this constitution is the source of this misery.
Okay.
Everything we complain about, the killings that are happening, coming from that constitution.
If I may, if I may. So
I need to build up to.
If I may,
I need to build up to where that, so that the proposition can be situated. It was a formal constitutional force majeure that was declared in 2020 that has that 5 points proposition at its conclusion to say, if we have to solve this problem after 50, 60 years of killing ourselves, these are the specific things we can do in this sequence.
Okay.
The first, yes.
If I may then. Right. If I may. So what I want to do here is, for the benefit of the audience, some will be aware of the propositions you put forward. In other words, the road track towards transitioning and future peace and prosperity. I want to ensure that they understand what the proposition means. So the first proposition is the acknowledgement of the constitutional grievances raised in the union dispute. So the question from me to you is, what progress have you made with the political parties and those entities in Nigeria who have or have not yet acknowledged that there are grievances to be resolved? What progress have you made, please?
The propositions were addressed directly to the federal government of Nigeria as the managers of the Nigerian Federation for now. Eventually extended to the state governments, because they all share the sovereignty they manage.
Yes.
And the peoples of Nigeria across a period of 90 days for the federal government, 30 days for the states, and 120 days for the peoples of Nigeria and international community to say all of what has been boiling across Nigeria, whether it was the Niger Delta agitation, it was all constitutional grievances. How did our oil and gas become the property of people in Kano, while we are being killed in Port Harcourt? If you look to the eastern side, you will see the Biafra flag and all the killings happening around it. How did we become members of the Nigerian Union against our discussions that happened at Lancaster House? In Yoruba, you see them on the street now. Their kings have been killed on the street, and so
you must
the grievances.
Forgive me, Tony.
I hear you.
Tony, hold on a moment.
The constitutional grievances from all across Nigeria. Look at the Middle Belt.
Okay.
Is what we have framed into the government have been carrying on. The politicians have been carrying on as if there's no problem anywhere. They have a democracy and everything is going to grow from there. So we say, let us acknowledge this problem before it consumes us. That's the first demand.
Absolutely. Which is why my question was asked. What progress have been made? Have you, since we last met, for example, and Nigeria is a large, complex set of communities, what progress has been made? I hear you, it's aimed at the federal government, but the federal government position is already clear. What at the local, regional level? What progress have you made at the local or regional level to obtain acknowledgement that there is a dispute which we need to resolve?
The government has carried on as if the people don't matter.
Okay, fair enough.
Where we talk about state capture, what we have now are a group of people who have formed themselves into some kind of a gang that can now take over Nigeria as we have seen. So they are pretending that nothing can be done. They have become the owners of our sovereignty. You saw the birthday ceremony or some colloquium of the president of the Senate, where the president of Nigeria was present.
Yes.
And Olisa Bakoba, a senior advocate, a lawyer, was telling them what to do about the constitution that has now become disputed. The progress we have made is that everybody, even in marketplaces, on the streets, children, everybody is now saying the constitution must go. The constitution is the problem. The only people not yet coming to that conclusion are those in government house sharing trillions of naira every month among themselves, which they just fritter away. Yeah. And so it is a question of the Olisa Bakoba was guiding them on what to do to bring another constitution from inside the National Assembly without talking to the people. That's where they are. They are still pretending. Unfortunately, that president, Bola Tinubu, is a product of this process. He
Yes.
was in Nadeco.
Yes.
He became governor of Lagos State from within Nadeco.
Yes.
He knows about what we are talking, what we are discussing, more than everybody else in that government he's running. But for some strange reason, he has chosen to stay with a constitution that render his people slaves, render his people vulnerable, and they are being slaughtered on this everywhere in every part of Yoruba land today, quite apart from the rest of the country. And
so Tony, if I may, and you're right. So my initial question is, what progress have you made at a local or regional level to have those parties who are should be partners with you to effect the change? That's my first question. My second question is your proposition B, of course, for those parties whom you engage to express a commitment to decommission the imposed fraudulent and unitary 1999 constitution. So my question here is, to what extent has the support for change grown since we have last spoken?
Wonderful. I can report authoritatively that the peoples of Nigeria have come to our own side in now demanding that we halt further pretense and pretenses under that constitution. And to tell you how far that shift of position has gone, the very person who imposed this constitution for them in 1979, who then became president, by which it was brought back in 1999, Olusegun Obasanjo, you all know him.
Yes.
He was opposed. He opposed us with everything he could find since 1999 when he was president.
He did, yes.
And on account of the pressures coming from what we're doing, he has gone public to say that Nigeria cannot advance any further except we do this constitutional reconstruction. That it must be a constitution the people made, which they can own, which they can defend against all politicians. That's Obasanjo now making a U-turn, 180 degrees. Then we had Utomi, who had contested the election a number of times under this constitution, who was P2B's chief marketer. Again, he says, constitution is the problem. We can't get anywhere except we go to solve it. We come down to, there's a former deputy governor of the central bank, Moghalu, who also had contested the election to be president. A number of, I think he's made a few attempts, but this last round was noticed by everybody. And so he says, all the economy, because they were asking him, the Naira that's on free fall, what do we do? As the expert, what would you have done if you became president? He says to them, everything we should have done is made impossible by the constitution under which it will be done.
Right.
Let us leave all of that and go and sort out the turn off the tap.
Yes.
And so when you begin to look, across board, you will see that this now the high end. Emeka Anyoko, the former Commonwealth Secretary, again, he raised his voice. I'm sure you heard him say, we can't get anywhere beyond, we can only slide further down if we don't stop to go to repair the constitution, the damaged constitutional, basis of Nigeria. So if we were measuring progress, I already reported that on the streets, even school children, I'm sure you saw Olani Kwekun, the former president of Nigeria Bar Association, who was also chairman of Board of Benefits. He said, we don't have a constitution. Why are we pretending we're going to amend what we have not made? The peoples of Nigeria are saying that their sovereignty has been hijacked. Why don't we leave every pretense and go and sit down and discuss how to work ourselves out of this union of death? And so, if we were to measure by all of that, you can see that there's been progress made. Only the government, the governors and their president are the ones who gather to share money, and the senators. They are the ones who have to make constitution for us.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. And I see that Nnadi she was with us for a moment anyway. It is not a problem. You'll do well, Tony. You'll do well.
Thank you.
So you've now indicated increased support, and that's clear. You've now gone on to the third proposition: express a commitment to suspend further national elections under the 1999 Constitution. Okay, the untenable outcome of the 2023 presidential elections must now be transformed into an immediate transitioning for reworking the damaged constitutional basis of Nigeria. Now, you've now started to allude that there's growing understanding as to why further elections should be halted so that we have time to transform to a new reworking of the damaged constitutional basis on which the country is operating under. So I think we've got the message there. And is there more you want to say to this third proposition that you've outlined? Any more you want to say, just so that the audience understand that there is progress being made? Go ahead.
Yes. Back to the second item.
Okay.
Apart from the acknowledgement, the next logical thing is an express commitment to decommission wholesale that constitution, because what we have seen since 1999,
yes,
these guys gather in Abuja and pretend they are amending a constitution we have not made, and so that's item 2 in the 5-point demand is an express commitment to the wholesale decommissioning of that constitution. Of course, we're not anarchists. If you throw away the constitution, the union will collapse on you, and so it leads us to the third. And what we mean by that second item is exactly what Frederick de Klerk did in South Africa in 1990, when after 80 years, we're only 24 years down the wrong road now, but South Africa, you saw apartheid introduced in 1910, everybody trying to reject it, all the fights, all the imprisonment of Mandela, Oliver Tambo. Eventually, it was only in 1990 that the pressure came to the point where the government itself joined in saying, let us decommission wholesale the apartheid constitutional order, which then led them to the transition of Kodesha, in which the owners of the sovereignties were on the table to discuss what will happen. And because we have been on this discussion since 1967, I'm sure you heard about our Buri agreement. When Nigeria collapsed from the coups of 1966, and the leaders of Nigeria, the military governors, and the head of, they all went to Buri at the invitation of General Ankara to discuss what could be done to refloat the ship of state. And from that point on, this discussion had been, because they came back and abandoned it and started killing people in order to impose the unitary arrangement that we ended up with. And so, we're in that third item of, suspension of election, is to say the constitution by which the winner will govern is what will determine what will happen to everybody.
Okay.
So to put a time frame for it on it, so that we don't keep kicking the can down the road like we have done since 1967. Say, let us expressly commit to not going to further elections like Frederick de Klerk did in 1990. He said, look, because the whoever wins the election will govern with that constitution. The structures will remain, all the leakages will remain, all the dysfunctions will remain, and things will only get worse. Let us put a time frame on it by saying, by committing to not going to further election, meaning that we will just have only one business to do, to sit down and sort out this, foundational, anomaly. Because we can't continue to build on a damaged foundation and expect to have an edifice.
Can I, may I ask you, Tony, here, for the benefit of the non-Nigerians who really want to understand who are the stakeholders, the interested parties here, and what is it that we might transition to? Within the NINAS logo, of course, you have a partitioned Nigeria. Okay, can you explain the Shira territory, the Middle Belt, Yoruba, and Lower Niger? What does that mean? What is the alliance territory? First of all, just start with the extreme north. Explain that for the non-Nigerians, what is meant by Shira territory. What does that mean? For the benefit of Nigerians.
Right. You see, when what we have on the table now is a union dispute. The type that confronted Yugoslavia a long time ago.
Yes.
The leaders of Yugoslavia could have called a meeting in which Croatia and Slovenia and others will be discussing to sort out their union into something that could work.
Yes.
But that meeting was not called, and Yugoslavia burst into flames.
Yes.
You saw the outcomes, and there are 6 countries that have emerged. A constitution is a union, a federation. Nigeria is supposed to be a federation. Nigeria became one country on account of the agreement to be a federation and a secular union. 2 fundamental agreements.
Right.
Now,
Tony, just to repeat that, just say it slowly. We need the non-Nigerians to hear what you just said, because that was a really important sentence. It was secular. Say again what you said.
Yes, Nigeria at the time the British colonialists were packing their baggages to depart, the owners of the sovereignties that have been consolidated, because Nigeria was a parchment of sovereignties. They just, by all kinds of means, gathered all kinds of people without talking to them. You saw what happened from Berlin Conference, where lines were drawn indiscriminately. So that was how Nigeria came to be one political union since 1914. Right. And then at the time the British were departing, they called the owners of the sovereignties. They were basically in 3 formations that could have been 3 different countries at that time: the northern region, the eastern region, and the western region. They said, look, you guys, we are leaving. How do you intend to carry on? And after almost 10 years of intensive discussions, they agreed that they could carry on as one political union, right, on the condition that their autonomy will be largely intact. That is autonomous regions, federating, in which they will set up a central government which will be financed and controlled by those regions as union office, so that they can have one currency and all kinds of common services and common defense system. And so it was a fundamental part of that agreement that that level of autonomy in which their economic assets would belong to them and the right to work those assets. Again, the other thing they had to agree upon was the matter of secularity. Because before the British got here, you remember that the Uthman Danfodio had come with his jihad in 1804 in that part that is now labeled Sharia. They had conquered that part, apart from the Kanuri to the extreme right. The jihadists had been here almost 60 years before the British landed on the Atlantic coast in 1860s. And so, from what the British got from the southern flank, they merged with what they found in the other side, with the people who came with jihad. It was Sharia they met in the place. It was Sharia they met on that part. Right. But if Nigeria was going to be one political union that would be stable, the middle belt that wanted to be separated from that northern region of the time on account of Sharia, raised the issue at Willings Commission. And so it was agreed that Sharia will have to be removed by those who were, holding on to it. They replaced it with what they call the penal code, so that people who are not Muslims can operate freely in northern Nigeria. And if it was so for the middle belt, you can then imagine the south, particularly the eastern part of southern Nigeria, where there's no form of Islam. And so it was a foundational agreement that Nigeria will also be a secular state. So the question of federation and the question of secularity. And by the time all those things were worked into constitutions, the western region had its constitution and they got self-governance. Eastern region followed and northern region in 1959. That was how they floated the Nigeria of 1960, in which everybody was making progress, very serious progress, such that the economy of Eastern Nigeria of the time was referenced globally as the fastest growing economy of the time. And so when in 1966 the coups happened, the one in January and the one in July, in which those constitutions got jettisoned and replaced by one constitution for a federation, in which everything was now centralized. The ownership of economic assets were now in the hands of that federal government that was supposed to be a union office. It's like the government, the management you hired to run your company, taking over your company and expelling you from the company. That's what has happened to us all the while. And what NINAS has done across the last 24 years is to go around to all the people who are victims of this bad situation, to say, our country, our lands are where we will not move. We are not going to carry our land into the Atlantic Ocean. we are going to continue to have to live here. But how do we secure our lives? How do we create a union of equal partnership once more?
Can I interrupt, if I may?
Yes.
Thank you for that explanation. That was very clear. And I know the non-Nigerians will now appreciate why the dispute of the Constitution is such a fundamental issue. It's fundamentally to do with territory and control of territory. That's understood.
Union agreement, to put it very simply, so that the Nigeria will be my project. The Nigeria we have now is not my project. Indeed. It's not the project of those Yoruba people that are being slaughtered.
Indeed.
It's not the project of the middle belt people that are being slaughtered. It's not the project of the Ijaw that are being killed so that their oil can be taken against their will. So Indeed. It has become an occupation. It has become something that is there to take our lives in order to take our land. And so we say all of us can sit down and sort out this matter. And we invited everybody to tell you how we landed at the 5-point proposition. We didn't just wake up and say, oh, come and take it like that. We had a process of 20 years of going house to house.
Yes.
We invited that North, along with other people, pro-NACO.
Yes.
Between 2005 and 2006, we had 164 ethnic delegations. Fulani came as Fulani with all the troubles. Ijaw came as Ijaw with all the headaches. Yoruba came as Yoruba. And we sat down across a period of 2 years to place all the issues on the table. And we did ask ourselves at that conference, gentlemen, do we still think we can manage to, organize ourselves as one political union in the face of all of this? Buhari, that is the champion of Sharia, was a part of the Fulani delegation that came to that, discussion, that meeting.
Right.
And the current Sultan of Sokoto, Syed Abubakar, who was a colonel in the army at the time, was part of that Fulani delegation. So it was a full discussion to say, let us go back to what can work. What we have now is unsustainable. You have a majority, more than 75%, that are willing to place their lives on the line to destroy that Nigeria that is now feeding on their blood. That's not the Nigeria they agreed to be in.
Okay.
And for those who are not Nigerians, who are watching from afar, those who think that Nigeria has to be sustained so that Africa can have a big country.
Yes.
We have a giant with a clay foot. Nigeria of unitary Nigeria, the Nigeria of now, Nigeria of this kind of constitution, worse than apartheid, has become the greatest setback for the black man across the world, because that Nigeria will amount to nothing. We have identified what the problem is. We have put in process a solution that is that is potent, that is applicable right now. The only thing that has not happened is that those who are pointing guns at us are saying it cannot be discussed.
No, Tony, so thank you. And you've gone into the fourth proposition, and
right.
Of course, you did it. So the announcement of a time-bound two-stage transitioning commenced with regional referendums for constituent components to recommit to or opt out of the Nigerian Union. Then destination of terms of union depending on the outcomes of the referendums. So you started to hint to this, but I did need you, but very slowly, again, for the non-Nigerians to appreciate what you're saying, I did need you to just unpick what I've just described there. Announcement of a time-bound two-stage transitioning commenced with the regional referendums for constituent components, in other words, peoples, to recommit to or opt out of the Nigeria Union. Just explain that for us. Slowly explain it, just so that it's clearly understood, the path that you're on, please.
Thank you. What you just read out now is the item 5. Item 4 is where we now came down to, if we go to this transition, what exactly are we going to be doing? Who will do what? When? How? Yes. And so we said, what has happened to Nigeria is that the owners of the sovereignties have been locked out of the entire arrangement.
Indeed.
And the captors of states are the ones organizing and sharing their blood. And so we said it has to be the Yoruba that could be a country of 60 million people today if Nigeria were to cease to exist. The Ijaw that could be a country of their own, the Igbo that could be a country of their own. Nigeria have been evading them. Nigeria has never allowed them to come to the table to discuss their sovereignty. It has always been either the British or the military that will impose whatever will become constitution. And so what NINAS has done differently is to connect with them, the owners of the sovereignty. Yoruba will be on the table, Ido will be on the table to define the modalities for even that discussion. So that it's not the business for National Assembly, because what has happened is that those impostors sitting in Abuja had now confiscated our sovereignty, which the constitution took, which the imposed constitution took from us. And so they say they are the ones who have to change anything that has to be changed. We say, look, we're not talking about change yet. We're talking about getting the owners of the sovereignty back to discussing a union, because where we are now, with what NINAS has done, and I want those who are not Nigerians to listen carefully. What NINAS has done so far has taken away the life of that 1999 constitution. So Nigeria that you hear about today is actually dead on account of the fact that the constitution that brings it together is a fraud which we have defeated by waking up the owners of the sovereignties confiscated in that Nigeria by that constitution. So that Nigeria is dead and gone. But there's still a country. That federation is dead and gone. But there's still a country. And there are people, 200 million, almost 220 million people still trapped there. If nothing is done quickly enough to rework the arrangement of how they could be happy in that place, and what is our demand on that account, we insist that it must be the owners of the sovereignties that will make that discussion. Yes. We insist that it must be a union of sanctity of life.
Absolutely.
We insist that it must be a union of equality of men.
Yes.
The problem that has been there for more than 60 years now is that Sharia that requires the adherents as a duty of faith to kill the infidel. We may dance around it as we like, but that is what it boils down to for those who have been slaughtered in the Middle Belt today. That's what they've been living with. That we have people, including those who can become president and commander-in-chief like Muhammad Buhari had just been. He was their champion. So they owe it a duty of faith to kill me, the infidel. And I have to be in political union. So we say no. If it will now cost us our life, I mean, we can't even question what they do. Like you see, nobody's questioning them now. You know, then that union cannot be sustained. We have to find our way out of it.
If I may, Tony, before
that's the question of Sharia. Then the question of feudalism.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm trying to explain to you why we broke it down into that 5. In one announcement, those 5 points can be taken. In one announcement, imagine that a president that regains his sanity comes to town today and says to Nigerians, we have wobbled around this matter long enough. We have a problem that we all know. That problem is the grievances flowing from the constitutional arrangements that is now upside down. That's item 1. He goes on in that broadcast to say, accordingly, we must now get rid of that constitution. Like South Africa said in 1990. In doing so, to put a time frame, we will not go to another election under this constitution that guarantees this evil. Fourthly, the owners of the sovereignties that were excluded in the making of this union arrangement, constitution is union arrangement simplicity. And so the owners of the sovereignties will please have to come to agree on the time frame within which we can carry out these changes. They already know what they want because of all the meetings they've had among themselves. They have common ground. And so it is to get them to formalize those common grounds. That's item 4. So that they can say in 18 months, in 6 months, we can go to A, B, C, D and have the formations in which and decide in 2 stages. The 2 stages remain there is because the union at this point is in dissolution. Whether anybody understands it or not is not of great concern to us on account of the fact that the constitution that brought us together was a fraud that we have defeated. We have defeated that fraud. And so the choices before everybody now is whether we can peacefully go back to refloat the union of and it becomes a union of agreement in which I'm happy to be there and my life is safe there. My economic assets belong to me there.
Yes.
Or if we refuse to discuss, those who have been slaughtered, those whose economic assets have been taken all these years, they will have no option but to work out their own salvation in their own way. That is what NINAS is trying to avoid, because it will soon become warlord. It will soon become Somalia.
Yes.
But if anybody is stupid enough, and I choose I'm a lawyer of many years, I choose my words carefully. If anybody is obdurate enough, if anybody is stupid enough to think that because you have people who are wearing some police uniform, army uniform, pointing guns at other people, you can then molest them and intimidate them into submission. They will kneel down and wait for you to come and behead them. We saw the role of Buhari that just left office. There was complicity, open complicity, in the killings that are going on all over the country. And if he's Fulani, and the people doing these things are known to be Fulani, and he's commander-in-chief of that army that is supposed to be protecting me, and he's standing the army down when the Fulani go in to kill people. What reports have you been getting from the Middle Belt, from the victims of those assaults? Is it not that there's complicity? You had a former chief of army staff, General Danjuma, saying that so in all of that, we say, let us first have those constituents, those who will federate in the Nigeria that will emerge from that discussion.
Okay.
Let them be identified, the owners of the land, and so they want to recommit. They will have to recommit by regional referendum to continue in the union, because it is in that first layer of discussion that the question of Sharia will have to be settled, and the question of feudalism. You understand? If you don't bring it up for discussion,
if I made this point, and you've beautifully laid out the pathway to peace and prosperity, and I should have really ended up the last slide here should have been the pathway to peace and prosperity. I think that's what all Nigerians want: peace and prosperity. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, and I should have, and I realise it would have been a more powerful ending. But the transition for union and reconfiguration, okay, is a necessity if we are to achieve peace and prosperity.
If we are to have a union at all, we have to have a union.
It is true.
We begin to talk about prosperity in that union. Those two stages. Those are the two things that have to be sorted out. And there's there's somebody called Bola, the Attorney General of Nigeria, that was killed the other time when Obasanjo was president. He raised this issue so succinctly. He said that where Nigeria has landed is that there are two questions we must now answer. Do we want to continue in this union? Because he knows that constitution is a fraud that cannot carry the union any further. And if yes, on what terms? Those are the two things NINAS has placed a clear mechanism for undertaking right now. For every day we postpone it, no less than 5,000 lives will be lost. Everybody can wish what they wish for Nigeria from everywhere. Yes. I can tell you that it's moving progressively to where it will go up in flames.
Yes, and that is understood. And I say again, I engage Nigerians every day, and what I note is a reticence, particularly here in London, to discuss politics for fear of repercussions. Okay, and
they could do that from the safety and comfort of their transatlantic airboats.
Yeah,
if they were to be in Jos, if they were to be in Makurdi or Boko, their attitude will be different, because they do not. If you do not stand up to do something to save your life, and we all pretend we do not know about the conquest agenda of the Fulani from the sub-region. We can pretend as much as we like, but I've had the privilege of going to Capitol Hill in Washington to discuss with the Americans who were wondering what was going on in that space. The UN eventually in 2019 sent a rapporteur mission led by Agnes Callamard. We can Google that. Agnes Callamard, 2019 UN Special Rapporteur on Nigeria, to come to more or less investigate why blood was flowing all over the place, and Nigeria was getting to where it could just burst into a hopeless situation. And what was their conclusion? What was the report? What was their finding? That the constitutional arrangement of Nigeria was like a pressure cooker for injustice.
Yes.
It is that injustice that the Ijaw is fighting in what you call resource control. It is that injustice that the Middle Belt is suffering today, where they are being killed and they cannot touch guns, because the Constitution took away the right to own assets or to touch guns. It is in the hands of that illicit federal government that is now controlled by the Fulani. It doesn't matter that there's a Bola Tinubu that has a Yoruba name. That constitution renders him completely impotent. Has he not been president for how many months now? Over 8 months?
Yes.
Has the matter resolved? Has he been able to stop them from killing even his own people? Even his own people. I've been on the phone since 2 a.m. overnight today with people who are raising alarm about the apprehension they have about being encircled by people who could kill them any moment, having killed in next communities. So that's the situation. So people could sit in California or Scotland or somewhere in Australia and say, oh, Nigeria, the great country, should be sustained so that Africa can grow from there.
Indeed.
The foundation of what will become that Africa. We're not tribal. You've listened to me now. You can see I'm not a champion of let's create little fiefdoms. No. Our eyes are on the global stage.
Yes.
Our eyes are on the African continent.
Yes.
Everything happening to us has happened to Sudan.
Yes.
Everything happening to us is happening in Congo.
Yes.
The same set of people from the other part of the Atlantic came in here to set up the whole situation.
Yes.
And this is the first time on the African continent that people have dressed back from the commotion to dissect and interrogate and diagnose what has brought us to this madness. And then reaching out to one another, instead of going to fight one another, we reached out to one another. When I talk about 164 ethnic delegations that met for 2 years, the US sent us up a mission. European Union sent us up a mission. And we came out with something that was a consensus. It was only the government of Olusegun Obasanjo that rejected that just refused and kept dragging people, killing the one they could kill, imprisoning the one they could imprison. The whole thing has gone worse. And they are coming back gradually now. But these ones who went to election, to tell you, as our ranks were growing, their own ranks were also swelling in some degree. The people that went for the calamities emanating from Nigeria today, the first blame will have to go to those who chose to go to election 3 years from 2020, when we put this plan on the table and gave there are more than 330 broadcasts on the NINAS YouTube channel. NINAS.org, NINAS Voice. That's the name of the YouTube channel. If you click on that YouTube channel, you will see where we were shouting the same way I'm shouting now, telling the people who are going to election under that constitution that the winner of that election will not find any Nigeria to govern. I'm sure you've watched some of those videos. That the winner of 2023 elections will not find any Nigeria to govern. As I speak, the president, the interregnum president, has fled from Abuja. I'm sure you hear about the relocation of Central Bank and relocation. The Dodam barracks that used to be the seat of power in Lagos is where this president has fled back to his own corner of the country. That was where we were in 1967, before it became war.
Yes.
We are back to where we were in 1967. And we're talking to people who do not have the discipline to even listen and understand what the issues are. They close their minds and tell us it's better to keep it that way. Whereas we're the ones who have to live in that marriage of death. It will not happen.
Tony,
we're a majority now, and the right to our sovereignty is not to depend on whoever will agree with us from anywhere. We owe ourselves the responsibility for our lives. We owe ourselves taking charge of our space so that we can defend ourselves if people are coming to kill us, people we can identify. But under this current constitution, you are forbidden from touching guns, and the people who are coming at you are entitled to carry guns, and the military will look away when they pass. But when you put, even if it's a knife you pull, the military will descend on you. That's the Nigeria we're living in.
Okay, so Tony, if I may then, at this point, it is important now that the people have heard you. Okay, this time the message is been well configured and well presented to both Nigerians and to non-Nigerians. And indeed, in Jamaica, there are people in Jamaica listening carefully to this experience, because Jamaica is going through a process where the constitution is being reviewed. Okay, at the moment, in my view, is a relatively light touch review that is to eliminate the British monarch from the constitution. Can you imagine? You know, the British monarch is the king of Jamaica. Can you imagine? Huh? Anyway, so it's relatively, at the moment, light touch. There are some, I believe, fundamental changes to the constitution that is required, but they are listening to you. And the idea that you've organized a conference with more than 100 ethnicities and found consensus, common aim and common purpose is really a testament to the leadership and the quality of leadership that exists in Nigeria. It's currently being suppressed by, I agree, an illegitimate constitution. And change is absolutely necessary. Tony, are you happy to take a few phone calls? If I open the phone lines, are you happy to take a few phone calls from the audience?
I'll be happy to do that. Let me just tie up what I've already said.
Of course.
By touching on the question of transitioning, which is what has to happen now.
Yes.
And if it doesn't happen early enough, you will watch Nigeria on CNN in the days ahead.
All right.
In the most negative form you can imagine. That transition is those in government house. Our quarrel has never been with those in power, because that's where the people miss it. Everybody wants to go to government house to replace, like P2B wanted to go to replace the people who were there under the same constitution that caused the problem. And so we were telling them, whether you were APC or PDP or Labour Party or ABGA, please, you all subscribe to this constitution and you will swear by this constitution. The 36 states and 7 local areas and the exclusive list, everything that made Nigeria what it has become will still be in place. And your hands will be tied. It's not within your reach to make constitution, because constitution making is exclusive to the sovereign constituent component. It's not anybody's or anybody else's business, including the National Assembly. Yes. And so the transition we offered, and they better take it while the offer lasts. Because if law and order breaks down, we won't be discussing transition anymore. It will be unilateral action. I'm sure you saw Yoruba on the street from the killings that happened to their king. You saw them saying that they no longer want to be in Nigeria. You must have seen the video by now.
It is true.
So the transition NINAS has offered is one in which those currently in government house, including the illicit president and all the governors and senators, can remain in place in the period of that discussion that must now happen. Like South Africa, you remember that Frederick de Klerk was elected together with Botha. He was vice president of Botha.
It is true.
And then Botha took ill, and then he stepped in as president. And he had the presence of mind to recognize and acknowledge that apartheid constitution could no longer carry the society of South Africa. That's where we are now. We are prepared to, if they do not take this option, the people who have been slaughtered on the streets, the people who have had to flee Nigeria to go to fend for themselves elsewhere, they may not give them that kind of facility of come, let us discuss. They will be looking for how to get rid of them permanently. And so we stand in the middle. We're statesmen. We are statesmen standing in the middle to say, gentlemen, we can solve this. We have sufficient intellectual capacity. We have enough commitment. We have a framework. We have consensus that took over 20 years to build. Let us solve this matter before it becomes something else. So that transition accommodates those who are doing this evil in the government houses of Nigeria.
Okay.
So stay in some limited capacity. That's what you see in that item 4 and 5. What will happen in the period? Transition.
Tony, thank you.
I just wanted to make that clear that we're not asking them to go home right now. We're saying you must come in an altered capacity, like the transitional government in South Africa at the time Kodesa was, holding his discussion. We're prepared to stand in the middle, even against those who may not want that. So let us. That's the price. If that's the price we have to pay for, achieving these changes without much of human, blood, like we saw in the period between 1967 and 1970. Gowon said that they had to kill 5 million people to keep Nigeria one. Okay, the Nigeria that is erected on the pool of blood of innocent people, those innocent people are taking innocent blood avenges itself. We can deceive ourselves to no end. Look at what is going on in Nigeria now, blood all over the place.
Yes, this is true.
Which investor in his right mind will come to such a space?
Okay, Tony. So what we need to do now, I realize the time. I was about to open the line, but I've actually almost run out of time. What is necessary here is for those, both Nigerians and non-Nigerians, who want to give support to NINAS, how can they do so? Do you have a website,
They go to the
best telephone number that you can share with the people? Yeah.
If they go to the NINAS website, www.ninasvoice.org.
So let me just do this again. So www.ninasvoice.org.
NINAS Voice, one word.
Yep, ninasvoice.com. In fact, let me...
.org.
.org, sorry.
Right.
NINAS, I'm going to get it on the screen for you, and this will help you. OOG, and let's bring it up on the screen. And what I'm going to do, if I may, I will just share it on the screen for those of you who are viewing us via Facebook and YouTube. It is possible, therefore, for you to see this on the screen. One moment, I'll put it up on the screen for you. The correct one, of course, Martin. There we go. And then secondly, so they can contact you and the organisation via the website. Okay, so that's clear. And I'll just bring it up on the screen now. There you are. There you go.
On that website, they will then find the phone number. There's a secretariat that will answer them 24 hours.
Okay.
Find the phone number to talk to anybody who has to be spoken to, and then there's a place meant for donation if anybody will want to support us.
Okay.
We haven't we have kept that we didn't emphasize that all the while because of all the criminalities happening in the name of liberation. People are just busy collecting money. NINAS had never asked anybody to come to contribute, but now they can see.
Okay.
We have arrived at the point where we have to execute, where we have to operationalize, and so we'll be happy to welcome donations that people may be able to make. There's a portion where that donation is made possible. And for those in the US, we actually have something that is tax deductible. I mean, we've had to make sure that whatever we're going to ask people to do, I think they're going to see what is happening with the money. That's why we hadn't before now asked anybody to come. If our people were to know what it costs to sustain what we have done through the last 24 years. They will weep for their failure to pay attention to it, because this matter went all the way to the UN.
It did.
We were directly involved in what became the instrument at the UN by which people can now lay claim to their self-determination, their sovereignty.
Yes.
2007, right after the Pronaco conference, we got this consensus, and we then went to the UN to see that nobody will accuse us of treason. At the time, we said we must now assert our sovereignty. So from that point in 2007, it came to where the US found itself in a fight with terrorist networks in the Middle East, who were then migrating to West Africa.
Indeed.
With Buhari receiving them.
Yes.
Boko Haram joining forces with ISIS to become ISWAP.
Yes.
And so we went to tell the US, and the US had the discipline 7 months from the January of 2019 to the end of July in 2019. All the departments of government in Washington took their turns to listen to us, because we told them that if they will listen to us, that we have something that can take out the source of that trouble that was brewing against them. That these terrorist networks want to take over the West African sub-region, but that they are domiciled in Nigeria as operational base, with the president of Nigeria as their chief host, and that if they could support our push to take out the constitution that empowered that madness, that it would be the solution to their own problem. And then you saw when they put Nigeria on the watch list, you saw when they put Nigeria as country of particular concern, that was why Buhari, with all of what he did to bring the Fulani from 16 different countries to overrun Nigeria, that was how he was prevented from succeeding. We haven't quite come out of it. They are still hanging around in the forest and killing people everywhere. The rest of Nigeria, those who have been sitting on the fence, those who have been deceived by all kinds of other people, this is the time for them to dress back and do what the UN had done, what the US had done, in listening to see whether they can find a new definition to that problem.
So
that doctors will do, you go from diagnosis to prescription and then to treatment. If you don't know what you're about to treat, how will the patient come out? That's where Nigeria is now.
Tony, hold on. And we're running out of time, you see. So what I want to do is give the audience the opportunity to make notes how to make contact with NINAS. Okay. Right. The website address, of course, it's www.ninasvoice.org. Okay, so that's clear. There's a Facebook account here, I note here, Tony. Facebook.com/Atlantic Posting. It says here on the website. Yep.
Yeah, that's one of our platforms. Okay. NINAS Voice. NINAS Voice.
And the other
if you just click NINAS, it's not even NINAS Voice. NINAS takes you to the Facebook wall. NINAS.
I've got that, facebook.com, and it's /NINAS movement here on your website. It says here, NINAS movement. Yep, okay, that's fine. And I know that you also have a Clubhouse account, and it would appear it's Clubhouse /club/Atlantic-Post-Club. Okay, but again,
I know that there's Restore Nations Clubhouse. You know, these are various platforms through which people can come. When you come in, you then see the NINAS is a big house, 350 something ethnic.
No. Yes.
Yes. So I have to make all kinds of entries for people who come from all kinds of places.
And there's an email address. It's info@ninasvoice.org.
Excellent.
NINASvoice.org. And if you are wanted to use telephone, I see there's a Nigeria telephone number, which is the usual +234 906 472 0016. I'll repeat that number for those who wish to call, make contact with NINAS. It is the usual international dialing code of +234 906 472 0016. There you are. So those of you who are concerned and wish to give support to NINAS, I commend this organization to you. This situation in Nigeria is one that I recognize in Jamaica, I recognize in the Sudans, and I recognize in many countries across the continent. I recognize this. But we Africans have the ability to come together in common aim and common purpose. And I'm confident that we hold the solutions. I mean, you've demonstrated, Tony, the wisdom, the wiseness. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And because we have such a great history, all things are possible. And I can see, regardless of one's ethnicity, you're prepared to hold hands in common aim and common purpose towards a path of peace and prosperity for Nigeria, for West Africa, and Africa across the continent.
For the continent.
Yes.
I had to go into just to interject there. Mm-hmm. To tell you that we are looking at the entire continent. Mm-hmm. In 2013, I had cause to go to South Africa mm-hmm. to the trial of Enrioka. At the time, they accused him of all kinds of things in Nigeria.
Yes,
and
yes.
For 2 hours, 35 minutes, I had to confront South Africa with the history of apartheid and told them that what the Boers did in South Africa mm-hmm. to generate the commotion that consumed the society for quite a while is what the Fulani had done in Nigeria. And that's what we're trying to resolve. And so the young people who watched live what I had to say in court on the day had to come to the hotel, and by the time, after a few hours of interacting with them, because they saw in a manner they had never seen before the history of their country on display. That was what became the foundation of that economic EFF, you see. today, because we told them that the political independence was secured by Mandela. Unfortunately, he had not enough time to get into the economic, part of the matter. So the Boers hung on to what they had, and they refused to board. The people that came after Mandela didn't do particularly well in going to that unfinished business. And so our eyes are across the continent. Our hands and legs are across the continent.
Yes.
But for you to have an edifice, the building blocks must be cohesive internally. Otherwise, they will crumble. Nigeria has to be cohesive. Ghana has to be cohesive. The other countries have to be cohesive. So when we now come to a meeting to remove the Berlin Conference walls, because that's what we have to do.
Yes.
We have to remove those Berlin Conference walls.
Yes.
But you have to get people on their feet.
Yes.
They have to take charge of their space. They have to take responsibility for their own life.
Yes.
In that, so it's easy to now say sanctity of life, equality of men, and best opportunities for everybody.
Yes.
That's where we are. This is the Nigerian component of that large task that is almost coming to a head.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Thank you. Truly inspired. You can understand why I'm so proud to be an African. I am so proud. I'm so proud. And I look forward in a few months' time, we will continue to plot the progress. Well, this level of commitment, success is ours for the taking. Yeah? Success is ours for the taking. Can I just say to you, Tony, thank you. You beautifully articulated the position in Nigeria and the path toward peace and prosperity, to which all Nigerians, regardless of their background, I know desire. There's no doubt about that. They're coming to Britain, they're coming to Europe for peace and prosperity. And they go to the United States to make a great deal of money and find peace and prosperity there. Can you imagine? In a foreign land, they have to go to find peace and prosperity. We can and we must and we will do this in Nigeria and across the motherland of Africa. I want to thank you for being an outstanding guest this morning. I'll continue to place details of how they can contact the NINAS organization. I've placed the website details in the chat. I've placed the email address details in the chat, and I'm now placing the telephone details in the chat as well. So I urge the audience, share this recording with your family, your friends, your networks, both locally and internationally. Let us all work towards peace and prosperity for all Africans, specifically those in Nigeria. Because we love the peoples of Nigeria. We do not want the constitution that currently exists. Over to you. Your last word, please, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We just thank all of those who have listened. Unfortunately, we would have been happy to take telephone calls. I don't know whether we have a minute or two to do that, but if we don't, there's going to be another time sooner than you imagine, because things are now at the point of no return.
I think I'm almost out of time now, unfortunately. But your responses were full. You provided full responses. I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted the audience to hear you, listen to the power and majesty of your delivery, and which is why there's hope for the peoples of Nigeria. This is why. Okay. Thank you, sir. I look forward to speaking to you in the not too distant future. It is unfortunate, of course, Nnadi wasn't quite able to join us, but that's why we'll do this in maybe 2 or 3 months' time. We'll continue to plot the progress, and there will be progress, I am confident. Thank you, and good day. Stay well, stay safe.